Hello and welcome to our Who Do I Sell To talk. So this talk is it's a kind of a companion talk to the one I gave a few weeks ago on market sizing. Once you know how big your market is, how do you get to the customer? And it's about segmenting the market into meaningful sections. It's about positioning your brand, it's about targeting your customer. So what I'm going to do is I'll kind of run through each of those sections, what they are and what they mean, and I'll use examples from big international brands that we all know. Then I'll kind of look at the same two examples I used in the last talk of Airglide Golf Trolley and Pipit Payments, which I'm involved in both of, to kind of give it a more close to home example of how this works. So I mean, what it is really, the talk is the importance of the segmentation. And the reason I picked this as a topic is because I deal 30 years of consultancy. I've noticed really in the last 10 years with social media, especially that people, a lot of founders, startups, people think that social media is their marketing strategy. And they've started at the end of the strategy. They just want to have an Instagram campaign and a TikTok campaign, but they haven't thought about who the customer is and how they're connecting with them and what they're selling them and how they're positioning it. So they're kind of, and from the talk last week again, if you haven't seen it, it's on olliewalsh.com. You can watch it there. A lot of founders are domain experts. They're programmers who come up with a good idea and launch a software company, or it's a chef who opens his own restaurant or her own restaurant. And there's a lot of focus on the product and not the customer and how to get to the customer. So this is where these sections come in. So segmentation it's breaking your market into meaningful segments. Who are the people and what differentiates people, who are your potential customers. So I mean, there's demographics, there's literally age, gender, are people a family, are they single? These are kind of deciding factors in what people buy. Psychographic is based on values. Sustainability would be big psychographic segmentation at the moment, selling to people based on their values. Behavioral is, think in terms of frequent flyer miles, for example. Airlines, really important for the airlines is the people who fly frequently. So that's a segment of their own, targeted based on the behavior of that person, who frequently is or predominantly are business travelers. So you have the likes of Aer Lingus, you get your Air Club card and you get lounge access and free drink, and because you're an important segment, compared to Ryanair, who don't do that at all, because their position is cheap and frequent, and that's what they're selling you. And geographic, of course, again, a lot of companies think when they're an online business that they're immediately global, but you can't target the world globally as a startup, really. You need to focus in on what your geography is. And again, the likes of Amazon aren't global. They only deliver to 2 countries in Africa, for example. PayPal aren't global because they don't do payments in most of Latin America. So even PayPal started in the US and broadened their way out. So they started with a geographic market and then broadened it out. So the benefits of this is like understanding your customer needs. When you drill down to a specific segment, the needs of that segment is different from the needs of a different segment. And then you're enabled to have a better conversation with them because you're tailoring your message to their requirements, which we'll come to more in the targeting. And you're increasing the effectiveness and efficiency of your campaign because you have a kind of a single voice. So some big examples. Toyota are obviously a car company. They're actually the first ever company to segment its market was Chevrolet in the States. You will have heard, or probably have heard, of the Model T Ford. It was available in any color you wanted as long as it was black. That was the biggest selling production car. It's actually still one of the biggest selling production cars, the Model T Ford. And Chevrolet launched 4 cars for distinct segments. And they took over so much of the market that Ford had to shut down for 18 months to retool to launch a segmented market. So it was a car company that did this first. So you think Toyota, they're a car company. They've got the Yaris, which is a small car for city driving. They've got the Camry, which is a kind of a mid-size executive business kind of car. They have the RAV4, which is a kind of family SUV with kind of outdoorsy sales pitch. We're going to the beach and they're only ever used for going to the shopping center, but this is what they're selling, is that kind of association with this outside life. And then you have like a Hilux or for agricultural work. So they're different segments. So and it's not, the decision isn't a single segment. So demographically wise, you've got a family, you want a family car, but psychographically wise, you want something that's energy efficient and is also low cost then if it's energy efficient. So there's more than one influencing factor on the segmentation. You might also be a family person, but live in a farm, and therefore you've got the Land Cruiser because you're driving it across fields as well as into town. So these are the different segments, or how the products are targeted to these segments. Kellogg's, they have a range of breakfast cereals. Why do they have a range? Because there's different requirements. So you've got All Bran and Special K are for the healthy conscious market. Very obviously targeted, especially Special K, very obviously targeted at women because women are more honest about their weight issues and do more about taking care of it compared to Rice Krispies or Frosties, which are targeting kids. And an important distinction when targeting or when segmenting is who's your consumer and who's your customer, because there actually can be different people. So with Rice Krispies, you'll see in the ad that they talk about nutrition, they talk about convenience, they talk about high iron values and all these kind of things and extra vitamins. That's for the parent. They're the consumer. They're the one that's buying it. But it'll also have a free toy, or it'll have a Disney promotion. That's for the customer, or for the consumer who's the kid, to get them to ask for it. So you've got two different segments. You've got your consumer and your customer within that segment. So they have a range of different cereals to cover a range of different segments, but they're all breakfast cereal companies. And Diageo, as we know, they have a range of different drinks for some, and there's a very different positioning, which we'll come to in targeting of a Guinness compared to Harp, for example, which is doing a bit of a rebrand at the moment. So they're kind of different segments of the big brands that you'll have heard of. So positioning then is, a distinct image in the customer of your product. How is it positioned in the market? How do you differentiate from your competitors? A unique brand position, and that influences decisions. For what we have in Watershed, we have a lot of startups here, and a lot of people, your product is relatively unique, but you're still competing with somebody. And from a startup position, you need to consider that for somebody to buy your product, they have to not buy somebody else's. So you're changing their behavior, you're changing their habits. And, people, it's difficult to change people's buyer behavior because they know a product and they trust it and they experienced it before. And a lot of times with tech companies, you're kind of tied into it. So, if you're moving from HubSpot to something else, there's a big job in getting your information out. But if you're launching, one page as a local CRM, you need to have a product that's differentiated so it takes from other providers in the market, which is a startup is a very difficult thing to do. When you're Toyota and you've got the budget and the range, you can position different products. So that's really where positioning comes in. It's what is that unique position that your product offers your customers that nobody else has, and how can you use that to influence their buyer decision? So what's your USP? What are your brand values? I mean, the brand values is a really big thing now, and it's now sustainability, like I said, it's a big one, combined with greenwashing with the likes of Shell telling us they're sustainable, and so there's a battle for this sustainable space. So who is the most authentic voice? Who is a real voice in the market? Because especially now with younger consumers are really prioritizing sustainability and values, whereas 20 years ago it was probably more price orientated, different products. So in terms of positioning, the undoubted master of positioning is Apple. They, from their 1984 Super Bowl ad, where they position themselves as the rebels in the computer industry, and they're not IBM, and they're for the creatives, true to kind of their products being really targeted, positioned with strong graphics cards and strong design capabilities compared to what was the IBMs or the desktops at the time. True to the iPod, true to the iPad, true to the iPhone, their positioning, they've captured a huge amount of the market, and they charge twice as much as for their products as other companies for what is essentially a relatively similar functionality at this stage, because the others have powered up. They've locked customers in because you have an iPad, you can link it to your phone, you can link it to, so their positioning has always been about innovation, being the new product, the early adopters, in the buying cycle, the early adopters, people buy a new product early. They've done a fantastic job in this because they haven't really invented a whole lot. As in, you know, they didn't invent the mouse for the computer, even though they were the first computer to have a mouse. Xerox invented that and made the mistake of showing Steve Jobs a working model of it, and Apple had it out 2 weeks later. You know, the MP3 player was a common but difficult device to use. The iPod is an MP3 player. They just made it cool. And, you know, for touchscreen technology existed, GPS technology existed, all this technology within an iPhone existed. They packaged it together and made it an innovative product. Gillette, really old example. So they invented the disposable razor. So up until that, everybody used what was called a straight razor. Now, Gillette launched their razor, and they called it a safety razor, and they created the phrase, a cutthroat razor. So that phrase was invented by the Gillette marketing team 100 years ago. And what was being used for thousands of years to shave now became a danger to everybody because it was called a cutthroat. And they managed to transfer a huge amount of the market over. And now they continue kind of in that innovation is all the Gillette ads you see, it's always smoother, faster, cleaner shaves, etc. And Lucozade is a good example. I mean, when I was, you know, 20 or 30 years ago, 40 years ago, Lucozade was only ever seen in a hospital. It was something you bought for somebody who was sick. And that was their position in the marketplace. Then in the 80s, when kind of the fitness craze really took off and people started exercising as a hobby, Lucozade repositioned themselves as this kind of high energy drink for active people. And they moved from this kind of convalescence market into the fitness market. And you know, they 1000x their sales. So that's the positioning in the market. What's the mind? Where you know, when you thought Lucozade, now you think somebody going to the gym. 40 years ago, it was a present for somebody who was in hospital. You know, the positioning, just to go back to Kellogg's for a second, you know, you'll have heard the phrase that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. There's no science behind that. That phrase was invented by the Kellogg's marketing department when they launched cornflakes, which was the first instant breakfast. Before that, it was either porridge or cook something. So it was convenience for the most important meal of the day. And now, you know, that positioning is belongs to Kellogg's. So targeting then, so you've created your segments. You've got your 5 different car segments. You know, this is a family car, this is an off-road. You positioned it with the branding. Where are you in terms of, you know, you compare, you know, a Lexus to a Toyota, to a Renault, to a Ford, to a Kia. You'll have different images evoked in your mind of these products. You need then to target that story to the consumer. And by targeting specific consumers, you're maximizing your marketing efficiency as opposed to a shotgun blast. It's a rifle blast. You're giving a very specific market message to customers. You know, the first step of that is evaluating the actual market. Now, we did the market sizing, like I said, the last day. How big is the market? How quickly is it growing? What are the segments within it? How do you position your product? And then the targeting is around getting that message to the consumer. Now, targeting consumers has been revolutionized in social media. So beforehand, you were using something like, you know, a newspaper ad, a trade magazine, a fashion magazine, you know, a hobbies, home and gardens magazine for selling gardening products. Whereas now you can very efficiently target, you know, people within a 5 kilometer radius. For example, in Galway, we do a lot of campaigns with Pipit because we're payments for migrants, so we can target just Nigerians only living in Manchester and target a promotion to them. Mass marketing is really for the big brands. You know, there's what's called passive advertising, something you'd see on a poster or a billboard. The person seeing it already knows what the product is. You already know what Coca-Cola is. This is kind of a prompt. That's mass marketing. It's for everybody. Whereas segmented marketing is a more deliberate message to that consumer, to a family. We're selling a family car. To a farmer, we have agricultural cross-country vehicles. Breakfast for somebody trying to lose weight or be healthy compared to something for the kids to keep them entertained. The niche and individual marketing really focuses in on a smaller market segment, which can be done very effectively through social media again. But you know, part of the reason for this talk is that that the social media, the targeting is the last step in this process, not the first step, which is where I see a lot of companies getting ahead of themselves. And then once you're launching, you need to monitor the campaign, which again is social media is brilliant because you can see clicks and you can relate clicks to purchases. There was an old saying that 80% of my marketing budget is wasted. I just don't know which 80%, because you're spending money on magazines or television or radio, or the traditional media. But a lot of that media still exists and it's still important. I had a meeting recently with the head of marketing from one of the big international call companies where you can buy cheap credit to call India or to call Nigeria. And I asked him how they acquired their customers, and he said 70% of it was flyers in shops. Now, this is the biggest international phone brand in the world. Flyers in shops, in the Polish shop, in the Nigerian shop, or you can make a cheap call to Nigeria or a cheap call to Poland. That's how so it can be as simple as on the ground marketing or a much bigger campaign through social media, but social media isn't the only way people get messages these days. Once you see your metrics, you know what's working, and then you focus your marketing budget more on what works. So generally, we were doing a marketing campaign. You might do 5 campaigns. We did a campaign targeting Ghanaians, people from Ghana in England, and we had 2 designs: one a happy family picture, and one the Ghana flag. The Ghana flag had 90% of the clicks because people immediately identified with it. That's Ghana. What's this all about? So all the budget went into the Ghana flag, and we knew within 48 hours to drop this ad and focus all the budget in this one. So that's the kind of feedback that you're looking to monitor in a campaign. So this is the air glide golf trolley, which you covered last day. This is one that I was involved in. This part of the trolley here expands and contracts with a patented spring system in it, which we had tested by the physics department in DCU, and that absorbed 80% of the energy required to pull the trolley. So back in those days, now trolleys are generally pushed now on a golf course, then they're all pulled behind you. So the pulling it was giving neck strain, elbow strain, arm strain. As we covered the last day, I went out and did focus groups around the country. I went in to driving ranges and golf courses with the trolley and rocked up to 5 or 6 people, kind of 10 minutes your time, demoed the product, told them what it was about. And what we very quickly found out was that men under 40 weren't interested in it because they didn't want to be seen to be using something labor saving, because it implied they weren't strong. Men over 40 all had bad backs and bad necks, and women generally took better care of themselves again. So it very quickly became our market is men over 40. And then we could target that right down to the person in the picture in the ad, because this is 20 years ago. So it was golf magazines. It was, targeting true media. We started in Ireland, was our geographic target. It's our home market, but Ireland also has the highest density of golf courses in the world. We could source information we needed from the Golf Union of Ireland about the numbers of golfers, and then we could target efficiently and effectively through golf shops, through Irish-specific golf publications. And this is the market sizing from the last presentation. Total number of golfers in Ireland, the golf market, golfers, men over 45. So this was our serviceable, addressable market. So that's where we started off, proved the product, and then we could use those metrics to then sell it to a distributor in England and sell it to a distributor in Canada and a distributor in Australia. And then you have to do this whole process all over again. Pipit Global, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Pipit Global, which is, we started off as a cash transactions. We've kind of repositioned a few times from cash transactions for e-commerce to cross-border cash transactions for migrants. We've now evolved into a emerging markets PSP, so we can do payment service providers across Africa and Latin America, where we can do cash payments, bank, mobile money, card, and then other alternative methods. So most of our transactions are now in Nigeria, Ghana, Uganda, Kenya, Brazil, and Mexico. So this was our original logo, Pipit. So I mean, the red is kind of anger, danger, but it's also urgency, which is why we picked it, because we were really working with migrants and getting money home and saving them money. the way it works is you generate a barcode and you go into like a pay zone in Ireland. They scan the barcode and you pay cash over the counter. So hence the barcode is in the logo in terms of trying to position this is what we're doing. The design with the two small eyes was something that our designer came up with, which we really liked, and we didn't test it. We all knew what it said. We didn't test it. So the marketing department, which at the time was me, made the mistake of not testing it, launching it, and then people started pronouncing it PIP IT instead of Pipit. So people started thinking we were a computer company and not a payments company. So our brand positioned us incorrectly in the mind of the consumer. So we had to change this. And the pay in person wasn't actually original part. One of the very first interviews that I did with a journalist, they assumed PIP stood for something and they just made up an acronym to go with it. So we said we needed to get ahead of this. So we then came up with, we kind of reverse engineered pay in person. The word Pipit, where it came from, is when you scan a barcode, it goes Pipit. So that was also part of the positioning, that this is kind of, you've got a barcode, you scan it, the name of it is the sound that it makes. So when we decided to rebrand this and we moved to Pipit, we added global to the name. So when we had this, we had one country. By the time we got to this, we had 20 countries. Now we 48. So it was kind of a statement of intent, but also saying, we're much bigger than you thought we were before. We got rid of the irregular capitalization. We kept the two dots. We kept the barcode. And I went around the porter shed with this on a phone saying, pronounce that. And then I walked around the town and I just stopped 20 people at random on the street and 18 of them pronounced it correctly. Said Pipit, one said pipe it, and one said, I don't know. So I mean, testing your branding can be as simple as just asking 20 or 30 people. But that was just kind of the brand itself is part of your positioning. So it goes all the way from, it goes right through your company, how you're positioning yourself. So we started off, our first market was e-commerce in Ireland. So the use case was people who didn't have banking facilities, the unbanked or underbanked, and then people who did, but were just concerned about using cards online and internet security. So we could find from the central bank and from industry resources, 5% are unbanked, 10% security conscious, 600,000 people in Ireland. People who would be interested in shopping online was 30% of that total, which brings us down to 180,000 people. And then we did questionnaires and focus groups. So this is all secondary information. We went out and when it was looking like young people were skewed, I did research in NUIG and at Loan IT to get down to the real core market for our product is the 16 to 25-year-olds, which meant where you're targeting them. You're finding them through specific media that's targeted to 16 to 25-year-olds, which is a lot of social media. We did things like beer mats in student pubs and things like that, to get that message out. So there's a layer in that. So that's kind of how we did the market sizing, but then how we segmented that is Ireland, 16 to 24-year-olds. It's people who are unbanked or security conscious who want to shop online, but either can't or are afraid to use a card online. And then obviously we position the market as you can now buy it with cash. Also, we got that message, because we're B2B, so we're integrating with websites at the time, and then the websites are telling their customers. So you might have 100,000 people on your newsletter, but only 10,000 have ever bought anything. So there's people on the newsletter for research, looking at products, getting product information. You're now telling them, you know what, you can now use cash to buy this product, which again is part of the positioning, because it's the brand you already know that you're on the newsletter of telling you this as opposed to somebody new. So the second market we went into was bill pay from the UK. So the migrant. So we started researching additional uses for cash. We looked at markets around Western Union and how much it is to send money home with Western Union, which is from the UK to Africa is 9.5%, which is a massive fee. And we had this cash platform, so we're like, we can do that cheaper. So we started talking to billers in Africa with the model that instead of sending cash home to pay the electricity bill in Nairobi, you could just pay it in cash in Galway or in Sheffield. So for the market sizing of that, we looked at like all the transactions from UK to Africa, which is 6.3 billion. Nigeria specifically, because we had Nigerian bills as part of our stack, and that's the biggest recipient. Nigeria receives about 20 billion in remittance per annum from around the world. They're number one in Africa. Number two is Kenya, which is 1 billion, and then the rest are below that. So Nigeria is a huge outlier in terms of market size. And then the Nigerian bill pays, because we know from the World Bank that 15% of remittances are spent on bills. So it's given us this size. And then you're able to use the social media to target people that, you know, are Nigerians living in Manchester or living in Sheffield or living in Birmingham with this message that you can now log on to this app and pay your bill in cash in your local shop. So that's how we use the market sizing to divide the segment, position our brand, and then target the consumer. So conclusions, it's really, you know, like I said, the point of this is that in terms of marketing, you start with your market sizing, but you need a meaningful segment of your market. How are you differentiating groups within the market? Lots of people have cars. They have different reasons for it. Lots of people eat breakfast. Pretty much everybody eats breakfast. How do you segment that out? How do you position your brand in that market in a meaningful way that talks to the requirements, the values, the benefits that the consumer is looking for? And then how do you communicate that message to them across all media, not just social media? So they're the steps to getting to then running a marketing campaign. So that's it for segmentation, marketing, segmentation, positioning, targeting. So the answer to who do I sell to is through this process of dividing down who the customers are, how you position, and how you target. Any questions?
Within that subset, how many of those are so built back incentive? Someone that is they're serviceable, like they're but how do you know who are using something?
So our focus was the unbanked market. So it was people who, predominantly in the UK, it was new migrants to the UK who generally lower paid, because if you're migrating to the UK and you work for Google, it's all set up for you, and they have a team moving you over. If you're moving to the UK from Africa and you're working in driving a taxi, construction work, fast food or whatever, you're in shared accommodation. Just getting a bank account is very difficult. So people are remitting cash because they know the way to get the money home. You can't use Transfer2 or Transformate or Remitly or any of these because you can't get the money into the system. We would consider all these guys channel partners for us. So we can load cash into these systems. So the only way to do it, there's two ways to do it. One is Western Union or the likes MoneyGram, and the other is what's called Howler, which is kind of an illegal, you give a lad money and some lad gives your man money in Ghana kind of thing, which is obviously money laundering, human trafficking, all this kind of stuff comes into it. So they're the options that you have if you're not banked. So we know how much money has been sent with Western Union from the UK every year. We know how much of it's in cash from their reports and from World Bank and sourcing place like that. And we know, again, from the World Bank, how much of that money has been spent on bills, which gets us to our SAM market size. So the message then in the targeting is, it's costing you 9.5% to send that money home to pay the bill, or you can use this service and it'll cost you 3.5%. And so, we're a social impact company, so that's how we measure our impact. Every transaction with us saves a migrant, on an average transaction, £200, you're saving 12 with us.
Would you include in your SAM or were you competitive?
Yes. Yeah.
Or are you adopted?
Well, if it's directly competitive with you, so we wouldn't include remittance apps because our SAM can't use those apps. So if there is competitive cash models, yes, I would use them. or if you're launching, you know, a remittance app, then all your competitors are part of that evaluation.
So there are lots of talk about this part, say, hey, here's what we can actually service.
Yeah.
But even within that, new adopter and existing adopter, it's sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. Anything else? Okay. Thank you very much.